Hi, friends, and welcome to the Homeschooling the Hard Subjects webinar. This is the ELA portion where we have Andrew Pudewa here with us from IEW. I'm so excited to have him here. I was actually on a live webinar earlier just with another blogger friend who's contributed to the homeschool collection that's live right now. And I told her, I said, I'm a little nervous. I said, I think Andrew is the biggest name we've had with us so far. And I'm excited to have him on and to have him join us for a webinar with my 5 kids running around. It's crazy around here. So I'm excited to have him. I just want to kind of introduce again who I am. I'm Brooke. I'm the owner and creator of Homeschool Resource Co. I'm the blogger behind The Fervent Mama. I initially started blogging and then saw a need for homeschool families to have supplemental resources that they didn't have to dig through. So I joined in with my blogger friends and we vetted some products and we put together this amazing resource for homeschool families. I'm going to kind of stick it up here right now. We do 4 sales a year. Each one is unique. This is right now we're doing the homeschool collection. It has 50 homeschool products at 97% off. We vet each and every one of these products, and the contributors in here are amazing. It's $33.99. It's a value of over $1,000. And in there, we also have like a vendor hall that includes freebies and coupons and all kinds of great information that's not even included in that value. So that's what's going on right now, and you need to get your hands on it before Thursday because after that, it'll never be offered again. So again, this is put together by Homeschool Resource Co. And we just have a great time having people on with us. The Homeschooling the Hard Subjects webinar has been one subject over the last 2 weeks. I think we've had, this is our 4th webinar. We have 2 more left. And today we're focusing on English language arts with IEW and Andrew. And I'm excited to have him here because we personally use IEW in our homeschool. We started with Fix It Grammar this year, and it's an open and go curriculum where there's no prep involved or anything, and it's super easy for somebody who's kind of a word nerd like I am to use. So I'm excited to have him here and have him join us. And Andrew, I'm going to kind of kick it to you to introduce yourself and talk about IEW a little bit before we get involved.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I am most importantly, a homeschool dad with grown children, all 7 of them. I have 15 grandchildren, and they're coming fast and furious. All of my daughters who homeschool, all of my daughters with school-age children homeschool their children. And so I live in this world of second and even a little bit of 3rd generation homeschooling coming in. We have a company called the Institute for Excellence in Writing. We are headquartered in Eastern Oklahoma. And so I am with you today from Tulsa, which is our main studio and marketing offices here. I have been traveling the country, the world, really, teaching various aspects of writing and composition and language development since about 1995. So I'm a good 25 plus years into this now. And I just finished my last trip of the season. So I'm very happy to not have to go anywhere for about 6 weeks now. That's nice. And so it's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm very excited to hear about what you're doing with Homeschool Resource Co. It looks like a great opportunity for homeschoolers old and new.
Yeah, we try to fit everybody in there from preschool all the way up until high school. It's involved in there, and even some mom products and some things that the whole family can be interested in. We try to kind of hit it all, and that's the thing we love about digital resources is because we give it all to you. You can use it, like say you have a 2nd grader this year, next year you can use the 3rd grade products, and then the 4th grade products. And so every year our collections are completely new. We don't include the same resources, so it's new stuff every year, and you can continually use it. I want to remind everybody to participate in the polls and to talk with us over in the chat, because the more you engage, the more fun this is. We are here live answering your questions, participating with you. And then the more opportunity that you have, we're going to give away something from IEW to a special person in the audience. We'll do a lucky draw in a little bit. But the people who participate in the polls in the chat have a higher chance of winning. So it's always great for you to ask your questions in the chat, participate in our polls at any time you have questions. Let's go right into English language arts. What does that include, and what exactly does it mean to you?
Yeah, so that's funny because I have never liked the term language arts. And I was having a conversation with the superintendent of a school district in Eastern Washington State, very intelligent man, PhD, articulate. I knew he was smart, not because of his degrees and being a superintendent, but because he homeschooled his own children, even though he was the head of a school district. And I was having a conversation with him in the context of working with his teachers and all that. And I said to him, I don't like the term language arts. And the reason I don't is because it kind of conjures up a whole lot of yucky stuff all at once. You know, if you say language arts, people immediately in their imagination start thinking, oh no, there's phonics for decoding and printing in cursive, and then there's phonics for encoding and spelling. And then, of course, you've got to deal with, not just reading, but reading comprehension. Then, of course, you've got to deal with, writing. And that goes from report writing to creative writing to who knows what else. Then grammar raises its ugly head. And then you can even get into things like public speaking and literary analysis. And it's kind of as though the list just goes on forever. And I think people can easily get overwhelmed when you use the term language arts in a general way. So I said to him, I don't like the term. And he said, well, that's because you don't know what they are. So I took a little humble pill and said, okay, what are they? And he said, well, in a more traditional or classical approach, there's only 4 of them. And they are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And I like that immediately. It brought a clarity and a simplicity, and it lined up right with my philosophy in many ways. And then he said probably the most intelligent thing I have ever heard anyone in a public school say to me. He said, one of our problems in education, and I think he was speaking specifically about institutional education, is that we spend a lot of time trying to teach reading and writing because we test those things. But we don't spend much time cultivating listening and speaking because we don't assess them. We don't test them. And in a school system, what gets tested is what gets taught. But then I kind of understood this, but he articulated as well that listening and speaking are really the foundation for everything else. So reading and writing are a function of, they're dependent on listening and speaking. So if we don't cultivate listening and speaking well, we will never be able to maximize reading and writing. So this was such a big impact on me. And this was many, many years ago, probably 14, 15 years ago, that when we kind of redid our corporate logo identity, that kind of thing, we added it as a tagline. So if you go to IEW.com, you'll see it says, listen, speak, read, write, think. So we think about the English language arts in that sense, rather than the kind of overwhelming list of so many things that come up for people. But there are, lots and lots of challenges with teaching writing. And I see you've got a poll there. What's the worst thing? So I'll be interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think that I always say that homeschoolers, we forget the basics sometimes. Everybody's homeschool is so much different, and everybody does things like even down to how often you homeschool or year-round homeschooling, planning your homeschool. Everybody is so different. And for example, and I'd be interested to see what you feel about this, but we don't officially start homeschooling until 1st grade, as far as like using a hands-on curriculum and actually teaching. We do phonics, and personally in our homeschool we do phonics, and my kids learn to read before we ever even start homeschool. And we do that through reading books together and doing flashcards and things, but making it fun so that when we actually start our homeschool, they have that foundation and they can work together through it with me instead of making it such a chore to learn.
Yeah, I am so in favor of that. In fact, one of the things that we do in this country is we push academics younger and younger, especially compared to a few other countries that have far superior results, such as Scandinavia. In those countries, they don't really push reading and writing until the kids are about 8 years old. Whereas now we have, heaven forbid, it shouldn't exist, but it does, pre-K language arts curriculum. And I hate that. I would prefer that everyone do exactly what you do, which is let your kids grow up naturally, read to them in huge quantity, talk to them a lot, and just have a language rich environment for them to absorb.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long has IEW been around?
I started IEW in 1995. I was a full-time music teacher at that time. I
Oh,
was
wow.
teaching Suzuki violin and kinder music. So I was spending a lot of time, 50 hours a week teaching music, every available hour. And I started doing writing seminars occasionally on a Saturday or a Friday, Saturday, just to see if I could make a little more money so that I could afford to continue to be a music teacher. And then we made some video tapes. If you remember, if you're old enough to remember videotapes,
Yeah.
and we started selling those. And by 1999, I've been doing this about 4 years. It's actually making more money teaching seminars and selling videos and audios. And so then we moved to a different city. I quit teaching music and went full time. So I've been at it full time 22 years now.
I had no idea that you had a background in music. Is violin the only thing that you play?
It's my primary instrument. My mother taught piano and voice. And then I got very involved in early childhood music education, which is kind of a specific field. And I was very active in that, in the Early Childhood Music and Movement Association. And I love music. And it was very interesting because over the years, I've seen more and more parallels between teaching writing and teaching music than
Yeah.
really any other academic subject, because it's an art. It's something you have to do in order to learn. You can't just read something and know it. You can't just watch a video. You really need to do it and have coaching and feedback and a pathway. How do you get from beginner to the next levels?
Right. We had, like I said, this is our fourth webinar in this series, and we had Nicole, the math lady, on with us last week, and we talked a lot about math and how to use real life examples to really hone in on math instead of just so like a public school. Like she even brought out the example of how many potato chips can I fit inside of my Pringles can, or going how she teaches her kids to go through the grocery store and find certain things and things like that. And then on Tuesday we had John Notgrass join us, and we talked about history and real life applications there. But then or that was on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we had Gina from Music in Our Homeschool join us, and she
Oh,
really hit on a lot of those things. Yeah, she's a great friend. She's been participating with us for since the beginning, actually.
oh,
And
so you will be very surprised or happy, or I don't know. But so my mother created a program called Singing Made Easy.
oh, so yeah, I know where you're going with that.
And so I was selling that for a while, but it was just kind of a side thing and it didn't fit really well with our company. And so in an attempt to keep focus, I gave her that entire course and said, here, do with it what you will. She was almost my only customer buying that product because we weren't marketing it at all. I said, if you can
Uh-huh.
get this out there, it'll make my mother's spirit, wherever it is, happier.
Yeah, she joins us, and we love Gina, and I had no idea that that's where that came from, because I know that she has a background in singing too, along with her music program. But she really hit on some of those things, and about how reading music is like another language, and how learning it and how the whole experience of music kind of involves in your whole homeschool, and how you can tie it into every single subject. So it's crazy how small the world is when you look at things from a full perspective, how we're all kind of connected in a new different way, and do things that way.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm going to go through the poll for a minute. We have a few people that recognize Singing Made Easy and they use it. So Anna even said, my girls have learned so much using your mom's method. So that would make your mom proud and happy too.
I'm so happy to hear that, because I haven't really been in close contact with her, and so I assumed, she was doing what she's doing, and she loved it. So that's great. Wow, look at that.
Yeah,
I'm very
we
happy.
really, we really
Yeah.
do love Gina. She's been a great addition. She has a product inside of the homeschool collection that's actually worth $40, and we're selling the whole collection for $33.99. So even if you just use that product and it's good for K-12, it's a great option. And then she also has something there's a secret offer that appears only for purchasers who purchase the collection, and it has a product from her in there too. So that's exciting.
Good.
In the polls, we have, let's see, a couple people saying, let's get to this one. Grammar seems driest, even though it is my favorite. So let's talk about grammar a little bit, and talk about how to make grammar fun, how IEW does it, however, whatever you want to talk about grammar. Let's talk about that.
Sure. Well, one of my beliefs about grammar, and especially the way I have seen it done over the decades in the homeschool world, is I believe many people start teaching what I would call formal grammar, meaning you're going to start, labeling stuff and doing exercises in a workbook or whatever, too early. It's a very abstract thing. And so when you start with a, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 kid, they're just 6 or 7 years old. It's very abstract. And I don't think it does much good at all, except it does have the possibility of causing a student to start hating that subject. Anytime you teach something that is developmentally mismatched with a child, the frustration can cause kind of a hatred of that thing. And then when they're older, they could probably do it and maybe even enjoy it, but they have that kind of record of, I hate this, I don't understand it, I dislike it. So I would say it's way better to wait and err on the side of waiting too long to start teaching analytical grammar or abstract grammar than to start too early. And I actually feel that about most things, but grammar in particular. One of the really odd things about English grammar is that it is pretty much an irrelevant subject to most English speaking children. So when you take an English speaking child and say, I'm going to teach you how you use English, it's a little bit like saying, sit down, son, I'd like to give you a little lecture here on how you ride a bike. Kid's like, yeah, Dad, I know how to ride a bike. Yes, you do, but you don't know how you do it. You need to understand all of the biology and physics that makes bike riding possible. And of course, the kid is just thinking, what's the point? Could I just go ride my bike? So I believe there's a certain problem with making grammar relevant to children. And you meet a lot of adults who will say, I never really understood English grammar until I took German in college. That's when it made sense. So rather than teaching kind of a heavy analytical grammar at a young age, we try to focus on immediate useful applications. And also, I encourage people to look at a foreign language, generally around, say, grade 4 or 5, that age when kids are about 10 or so. And then you start doing a foreign language, because that's when you don't already know how to do everything. That's when what are those things called and what are the rules that govern their behavior becomes important. So, we have a grammar curriculum called Fix It that's, I would say, more on the applied grammar side. And then I'm strongly encouraging people to look at a foreign language, especially Latin, as the best way to teach grammar, i.e., the structure of language, to students a little bit later, 9, 10 years old at the earliest.
I think I mentioned it earlier. I think as homeschoolers, sometimes we forget about the basics and how we're teaching our kids about adverbs and verbs and adjectives and everything when we're reading them books, when we're going over things, when they say, hey, what does that word mean? Or things like that, we're already teaching them. And those are hands-on real life applications that we can use that. Like even we like to do a lot of games because we do family style homeschooling. So we like to do a lot of games and kind of quiz each other and things like that. So one thing that's fun to do is when somebody's talking or we're telling a story or whatever, just stop and say, can you give me a synonym for that word? Or something fun where they have to use their brains to think, okay, I said the word run, but what is a word that I can replace run with that seems more educational, or that can, it kind of gets their wheels turning and things like that. Like when you're reading a book and they stop and say, hey, we've been reading through the Chronicles of Narnia series and we're on the second book, and my kids will say, hey, what does that mean? What's that word? And we'll say, oh, well, that's a verb and it means this. It kind of means it's a synonym of this word is, such and such. And so those are real life applications where we might not be writing and labeling what those words are, but they remember those things because they were real life applications. We were sitting there hands-on reading a book and doing that. And that's why Fix It Grammars can be so fun, is because it's actually based on a book. Like the one that we worked on was The Nose Tree. And it is based on a book that you can read and go through and mark out and kind of make note of those things as you're reading through the book and as you're doing those things. And so I think that's so important to realize that we don't have to sit and be doing book work and things like that in the beginning. Of course, if we struggle or if we need some extra help, those are all great things. Supplemental resources are fun. But when we do those real life hands-on applications, that's what our kids remember.
Yeah, Mad Libs would fall into that category. You don't really care about parts of speech, but if you're doing a Mad Lib and you have to fill in your adjective, adverb, noun to play the game, then suddenly there's application. And
right.
So I'm totally with you on that it's all about, is it relevant to the child? If it is, it's going to be something that's much easier to learn. If it is not relevant, it will be much harder to do.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna ask you this question, and then I'm gonna look over the polls a little bit and see how things are going. But what is one English language arts myth that you have heard that you could debunk? Something maybe that somebody said. You talked a little bit about it when you said that the headmaster of the school said that you didn't know what it was. So
right.
It's kind of like something that surprised you. Do you have another one that you could share with us?
Probably that the way to start teaching writing to children is to give them prompts or to focus on what a lot of people might call creative writing. That's actually one of the hardest ways to get started, but you do see a lot of curriculum out there that will try to say, here's how you start. And that's all over the public schools, is give kids paper, try to help them figure out a subject or something they know about, and just let them spew words onto paper and then tell them whatever they did is good, and don't correct it, don't edit it, just cheerlead them into it. And that's how you create kids who love writing. Well, it totally backfires because, number one, half the time they can't really think of much to say. Number two, the kids themselves know it's not right, it's not good. And when teachers say, oh, isn't it wonderful, it's disingenuous. Kids like systems. They like to know, what do you do first? What do you do next? What do you do next? So let me give a very quick overview to people on what is necessary for a child to write something. and this is actually true for all of us, but if I said to you, Brooke, I want you to write something, the first thing that has to exist is an idea. There has to be an idea. If there's no idea, it's not possible to write anything at all. Usually what you want is a sequence of ideas that have some kind of logical progression, but you have to find those. Now, an idea can pre-exist outside the memory or imagination, or it can pre-exist inside the memory or imagination. I'll give you an example. If I said to you, write about the last trip that you took with your family, that would be information that pre-exists inside your memory or imagination, right? Or if I said to you, write about your favorite animal, a lot of that would pre-exist inside memory and imagination. Whereas if I said, write about the room that you're in right now, that would pre-exist kind of outside your memory because it's immediate. Are you with me on this?
Absolutely, yeah.
So a lot of times people are asking children to access something in their memory and then write about that. What we have found, it's much easier to access something that is immediate because it's objective and it can be apprehended and then used. The second thing is that an idea can pre-exist primarily in words, or it can pre-exist primarily in images or feelings or impressions. So if I said to you, please write about the last trip you took or a restaurant you like, you would be accessing your memory, and then you would be trying to find the details that exist in your mind, not necessarily with words, but mostly with sensory impressions. Or I could say, here's an Aesop fable, and I could read it to you or read it with you, and that would pre-exist in words. Now, wherever the idea comes from, whether it's inside memory or imagination or outside and immediate coming into your senses right now, whether it pre-exists in words primarily or not, that idea has to be found, has to be discovered. Then that idea must be spoken into existence. So a child has to then say to themselves words that attach to that idea. So this means that the idea, if it pre-exists not in words, they have to have the vocabulary to attach to it. So if you say to a child, write about your dog, or whatever animal you have as a pet, or whatever animal you wish you had as a pet, but mostly, let's say, write about your dog, kids, they would start out and write something like, my dog is a really awesome dog. I really, really love my dog because she is so awesome. She is so, so, so fun. And I really, really love her because she is so awesome. And then you kind of wind down, and that's all that the child has been able to come up with. Because why? Well, a dog, their experience of a dog, it's visceral, it's emotional, it's physical. You play with the dog, you wrestle with the dog, you pet a dog, the dog licks you. All that stuff that happens is not necessarily stored in words in the brain. So the children have a hard time. Whereas if I told you an Aesop fable and said, retell me that fable, you'll have an easier time speaking it into existence because it pre-existed in words. So the child has to apprehend the idea, speak it into existence, and then the child has to hear what he or she said. And I'm sure you've got children, all of us have children. You have noticed that children can actually say things and not hear what they said. So they have to hear what they said to themselves, and then they have to hold that in their memory long enough to be able to go and get the handwriting and spelling information in order to commit the first word in that sequence to paper or screen, depending. Then they have to hold it and get the second word and get that down. They have to go back to their memory, get the third one and hold that one, and keep going until they've got the whole sentence down. Then they have to go get the next idea in the sequence and repeat that whole process. And so it's very, very complex for young children or kids who have any kind of disability or something. If there's a breakdown anywhere in that process, they have to start all over again. And so it can become overwhelming and exhausted. So part of what we have been doing at IEW is take that very, very, very complex process and start in the easiest possible way, break it into the smallest possible steps, and then build on that to create a pathway toward that type of write whatever you're thinking about something right now. So the worst way to start with teaching writing to a child is that blank page. And the best way to start is with tight modeling, generally using a source text, which is information that is immediate and already in words. And so that's what we do. And I think that would be the biggest kind of myth about teaching writing that I have encountered.
Yeah, I think so let me give an example and tell me how I could personally make it better in our homeschool, because I have a daughter who she'll be 10 next week, and she really struggles with writing. She loves reading. Like if you find her somewhere in this house, she's probably reading a book right now. And she loves reading. She loves learning. She loves questions and answering questions and all, but she really struggles with writing. And we did grammar. She loved grammar. We finished it early and everything. So what I've learned to do is to take a book, and we read the book, and then we ask questions, and I make her answer them verbally before she answers them on paper. So we were, for example, our book was on Amelia Earhart, and I had questions for her, and the way that we were doing it was she was writing a mock report. And so every day we would read a portion. I would ask her a question. She would verbally answer, and then she would have to kind of mold together the question and the answer for her mock report. And every day we would add a little bit more to the report. So is that kind of what you follow along those lines, or how could we make that better?
Yes, so no, I like that very much. What I would probably do to help her even more is I would use a whiteboard, and I hope all homeschooling families have a large whiteboard, not one of these little 1 foot by 2 foot garbagey things you pick up at Target or something. You need a big, like 6 foot whiteboard. That I would buy that before I would buy any other thing to homeschool with. But nevertheless, so what I would recommend is when you're having this conversation, asking her questions and she's giving answers, try to be kind of like a secretary, so that you would write on the whiteboard some of those questions and answers, but I would do it in a keyword outline format. So if the question was, where did Amelia Earhart grow up? And then she told you from reading the book, which unfortunately I don't have that little bit of random information in my mind. Maybe you do at this point. So I might put on the whiteboard AE, comma, grew, comma, and then the city, state, or country, or wherever, and then maybe the year, so that there are hints of the complete thought. And then, the next question, I don't know what it would be about. What did she like to do as a kid? And then, child, favorite, child, comma, favorite, comma, and then maybe 2 words, whatever she liked to do, tinker around with mechanical stuff or play with paper airplanes. I don't know. But, I would put those things so that what you end up with then on the whiteboard is kind of you're having taken notes from the conversation, so that she won't forget the questions and answers. And then she can just make sentences out of those key words. And I think that would make the whole process less overwhelming. She would be able to attend to how she's writing those keywords into sentences, because she wouldn't have to figure out what's the next thing to say. It would all be there, kind of a what we would call a keyword outline format. And that just frees kids up so tremendously. So that's how I would kind of look at that. And at the same time, I would suggest that she learn how to make a keyword outline from a source text that is much simpler than a whole book. So I like to use Aesop fables. Everybody can use Aesop fables. Use them with, second graders. You can use them with graduate students. Nobody complains about Aesop fables. And then show her how to read a sentence, choose maybe a maximum of 3 words from the sentence, copy them into an outline, read the next sentence, choose, copy, choose, copy, choose, copy, put the original away, and then rewrite that existing fable. And then if she wants to play with it, change something, change the characters, dress it up a little bit, there are ways to teach how to do that as well. So working in both areas, working from memory, what she read in a book, as well as working with an immediate source text, those are going to be great ways to just make the whole process more manageable for a young child of that age.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it actually helps a lot, because that's one of the things that we struggle with was we go over the question and I'd tell her, okay, well, let's see how we can form that. And we kind of work together in doing it, but she would forget her answer. She couldn't remember exactly how I asked the question and things like that. So that would make perfect sense. I have my 5-month-old just woke up from her nap and she is screaming in the next room. So I'm going to ask you a question and have you answer it really quickly while I go grab her and come right back. And the question is going to be, family style teaching. How can you do that with a English language arts curriculum or as ELA as a whole?
Okay, well, first of all, with family style teaching, you want to consider that there are subjects which are cumulative, that are skills based, and subjects that are not cumulative. They're primarily information based. So I'll give a couple examples of this. Math is a cumulative subject, meaning you have to learn addition facts and master those before you want to move into subtraction. You have to learn multiplication facts and master those before you move into double-digit multiplication or division. Writing tends to be a cumulative subject in that way. A foreign language would probably fall into that category as well. Whereas non-cumulative subjects would be things like literature, history, science. Those do not have to have a mastery in order to learn more of it. In fact, history isn't even chronological. You don't even have to learn history information in any particular order. As long as you've loosely got dates connected with things, you can learn them in any order, and then you can kind of put them in order in your mind as you grow up. So with cumulative subjects, then you either need to teach children individually, or you need to bunch them together if they're close enough to do so. Whereas with non-cumulative subjects such as science or literature or history, you can basically do the same thing with almost everyone, generally teaching from the top down. So very often I will say, okay, in terms of using our writing program, if that's what you want to do, how old are your oldest two? Oh, okay, they're 10 and 8. Well, tell me a little bit more about them. There's a good chance that you could do our writing program with those children because they're close enough in age or aptitude. And so you can bundle them together. Maybe you have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and then you have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. So you could bundle them together, the top two and the next two, or maybe the top three and the bottom, or maybe the top one alone and then the next two. So chunking kids by age and aptitude works very well, I think, for that. Math is pretty easy in terms of everybody can work at their own pace. You show a kid a new operation, he goes off and practices for a while. That shouldn't take you very long to do the direct instruction part And then hopefully you've got a system where the child can self-test, self-correct, self-correct their own work, go back, figure out what was wrong, and then if they have a question, come to you. So managing that is mostly independent, very little bits of direct instruction. Writing, you need a little more direct instruction, but again, if you can do it to 2 children at once, and then they can go and write, then that frees you up to deal with the baby, which obviously is important. Whereas if you're reading historical fiction, I would simply read mostly, I would spend most of the time reading to the top couple kids and just let it trickle down and don't worry about that. Science, of course, you can do, nature trips and kids can organize. And, if you want to get a science textbook, you can. I'm not a huge fan really of textbooks at all, but you can. And then, of course, the really important things like just reading literature and talking about it, that mostly can happen in a group, focusing with the higher and just letting it trickle down and not worry so much. So I hope that answers your question, but mostly think about the things that are cumulative and need to be developed independently at a skill level versus things that everyone can read about, listen about, talk about, and kind of do together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we do a lot of family style here because my older 2 are the only one that I'm homeschooling right now. My other 3 are 4 and under, so we hadn't really started yet. So they're really close in age. She'll be 10 and he's going to be 8. So we kind of do everything together. But my son, he's a little bit like, he enjoys math. He likes math a lot. He's very good at math, whereas my daughter is not. And he struggles with writing. Writing is as far as like handwriting and things like that go. So we do a lot of hands-on together things, and then we do a lot of things separate. But one thing you mentioned, you kind of went over all subjects there. And one thing that everybody asks on every webinar, we have an email or something going on, and they say, what homeschool curriculums do you love? Are you in a position to share which ones that you've personally used in your homeschool and really enjoy?
Yeah, I can tell you that, but if you had to use one word to describe our whole 30 years of homeschooling 7 children, the word probably would be eclectic, in that, you may find something that works pretty well for 1 or 2 kids, but it doesn't necessarily work for all of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what we did most of the time was we had a syllabus that was very general. It didn't have a big pile of books associated with it. It kind of basically was an outline for what you could do for each grade level and all the different subjects. And because we're a Catholic homeschooling family and we appreciate the classical approach to teaching, we used this program called Mother of Divine Grace, which is still available, I believe. But, it's like the book for grade 5 is that thick, and it's basically just giving you a bunch of things to do. And then if you need to get things to use, you've got to go get them. So it's not a package or a box or here's, the pile of books with the number on the cover for everybody. We also used, for most of the kids, Matthew C. And there's a lot of things I like about Matthew C. I think it's even better now than it was 15 years ago. Steve Demme, very good friend of mine. We supplemented that with a few other things. A couple of the kids went to the Kumon Center just for extra drill. I taught geometry when the kids were old enough, because that was the kind of the only math that I had any interest in teaching myself. So there was that. We really did a lot of things together that weren't necessarily what you would put on a transcript per se. Things like drama, things like travel, things like classes in, economics or something, where I wanted to teach that. So I think if most people think about, well, there's skills, which is basically your language skills and your math skills. So, the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. That's at the core. And then what you read, then that takes you out into various areas such as history, literature, and science, or off onto kind of a side. But I will say that my wife and I, as the kids got older and we'd been at this longer, we were much happier to allow the teenagers to have a lot more say in what they wanted to read and learn about. And I think that this has served them very well because, if you have a big family and you've got a good start there yourself, but once you've got 6 or 7 kids, you really need to have older students who are very self-directed and able to help you with younger kids, but not needing you to spend an hour a day helping them figure out what to do.
Right.
So any type of thing that we use that could move toward independence, we really like that. IEW, we have a spelling program, and it's a great program because it requires almost no daily time from the parent to administer. It's a self-test, self-correct, auditory, just keep words in a notebook kind of approach. So I have always preferred things that allow the child to more quickly move toward being able to do things independently. And then you may have a student that has, an issue like dyslexia or dysgraphia or ADD, ADHD or spectrum issues, and then you can spend a little more time on that child who needs a lot more. I will say that we supplemented our reading to the family with audiobooks, and I am a huge, huge fan of abundant audiobooks in children's lives, especially for the kids who, for one reason or another, are not going to become big readers like you're blessed with in your daughter, because some kids just aren't going to ever get there because of the neurological situation. But everyone can listen to audiobooks while they do chores or play with Legos or climb trees or pretend to do math. Who knows?
You mentioned something, and we've had somebody in the poll ask kind of, it wasn't a question, but it was a struggle that they're having, which was with dyslexic and dysgraphic. She has a daughter that is both dyslexic and dysgraphic. So how can you give her some tips on how to, whether it be through your curriculum or just some tips for her teaching English language arts?
Sure. We have got a huge resource. If you go to IEW.com/SPED, which is the code for SPED or special ed. But I have interviews and podcasts with people like Susan Barton, the IDs who wrote The Gift, The Dyslexic Advantage, podcasts with my son, who's so dyslexic he didn't read a book till he was 12 years old. So I have a lot of resources in that way. But to sum up, number one, capitalize on auditory information. Do a lot of things like math and spelling verbally as much as possible. When you do give dyslexic, dysgraphic kids stuff to look at, be sure that the font size is as large as you can get. Go ahead and be their secretary. Let them dictate stuff to you and write it down for them. And above all, do not have anxiety about a child who isn't reading or writing, even though they're 7 or 8 years old, because that is not really the most important thing. Like I said, I had a son who could not read anything at all, not even 3 and 4 letter words until he was almost 11. He didn't read a book until he was 12, but he listened to hundreds of audiobooks. And when he started to read and write much more fluently as a teenager, 14, 15, his writing was magnificent because he had furnished his mind with this incredible vocabulary and complex and sophisticated language from literature. So the most important thing that any parent, I would say, that any parent can do on a given day, whether their kids are dyslexic or not, but especially if there's some of those dyslexic tendencies, is reading out loud in huge quantity as much as possible all through childhood. And don't stop reading out loud to kids just because they start reading on their own. And That would be my suggestion. The number one predictor of good writing skills in adults is having been read to a lot as a child.
Yeah, I think that sorry.
Hey,
I think we have someone in the who's in the Q&A, and they said they were in tears because their son didn't read until he was 10. And that's what I love so much about this community, and the ability that we have to join together and talk over video call and technology and things like that, is because we can share these stories and let other people know, look, you're not alone in your situation. I was reading a story about a homeschool parent this morning who took their kids out of public school because of a similar dysgraphia issue, and just looking for encouragement and things like that. So I love this community, and I love that you said that and that you shared your resource, because we're reaching parents across the globe. I know that we had nearly 800 signups for this webinar in just a few days, and we have many people who are going to be watching the replay on this, and it's just going to be an awesome, amazing experience. So let's I'm going to ask you another question and see if I can get her calm for a second. Let's name 3 professions that require a basic knowledge of English language arts principles that you wouldn't otherwise think about, so that don't necessarily focus on that, but that you would need if you go into that profession.
Well, you know, I tend to say something this way. It's not going to answer that question literally, but this is what I tell kids, especially when I meet parents or kids, say, 12 to 15 or something, who don't like writing. I say this: it doesn't matter what field you go into, whether it's engineering or the military or garbage collecting. It really doesn't matter, because here's what happens. If you are a good engineer, you will be an engineer, and you'll be a good engineer. But if you are an engineer or a military person or a garbage collector or a musician or anything who can communicate well, who can write and speak engineering ideas, you will rise up in positions of influence and leadership. So the good engineer remains an engineer, but the good engineer who can communicate engineering ideas will become, a section head or a department head or a vice president, or, something where you have a greater ability to impact the world. So I would argue that skilled communication will help everyone in every profession. And I would argue that it helps you if what you end up doing is becoming a full-time homeschooling parent as well.
Yeah, you've talked a lot about how language, how speaking really plays a part into all of that. How, when we learn how to speak, it can help our language and our writing and be able to express our ideas and anything like that. So even if you become a homeschool mom and you don't necessarily have a profession outside of rearing and raising kids in the admonition of the Lord, then you still need that ability to be able to speak and communicate well, to do that, to have healthy adult conversations, to participate in the world, really, to be able to do that. So I think what you said is so important, to forget about, I'll never need that, because I was that kid. I'm a first generation homeschooler, homeschooling my own kids, but I went to public school where they did a lot of the things that you said. We were given these prompts and said, do it, and then great. And then, but we never really honed in on those specifics of why we did those things, and really concentrating on making them better and things like that. So I think just mentioning that the way that you did it, like how you compared it to engineers, and how one who can communicate and better effectively share his ideas is going to do better than the one who can't, not because they're not just as smart, but because they learned those foundations as a child.
Yeah, and I know a lot of kids who've gone into the military, and that's very interesting, because once you get into the military, whether you're, on the officer track or not, if you can speak and write well, you immediately will take on more responsibility than those who can't, which means, if it's a career, a better advancement opportunities as well. And, I think today all of us are kind of acutely aware that what our country needs most is people who can think well and communicate the truth in a world that seems to be increasingly unable to think clearly and is in desperate need of more truth. So it's almost like a missional thing rather than just simply a practical one.
Right. I think me and my husband talk about that a lot. We and this is going to sound ugly to say, but just for lack of a better term, we are filled with a bunch of educated idiots in this world. Some people who they have a bunch of knowledge but don't know how to apply that knowledge, or they have a brain full of things that people told them that necessarily may not be true, or may not be sought out, or may not be looked at in the whole context, because we have so much technology at our fingertips, but we don't know how to use it, and we don't know how to effectively use those tools to better advance our knowledge, because we take for granted that, oh, I can pull up Google and find the answer to that, or something. And so we have trouble communicating in conversations. We live in a very divisive world, and it's hard to have a conversation with someone, not only speaking, but in the technology like Facebook and Instagram and these things, where we have to communicate the way that we feel, and we have to be able to have this healthy debate, and these things go on. But if you can't effectively communicate, and if you can't tell people how that you feel, then, that's where we, again, come up with a bunch of educated idiots who, we know these things, but we unfortunately don't know how to apply them.
Yes, my great mentor, Dr. Webster, once said to me that a good idea, poorly presented, is not as powerful as a bad idea, well presented. History proves this. And he was an historian, a PhD in African history by primary profession. And if you look at history, you can see some really bad ideas that had power because of the way in which they were presented, and a lot of suffering and misery came from that. So what we need, I think, is we need to have kids who grow up to be able to understand the truth and good ideas, and be able to speak and write and promote and present those effectively in a world that is increasingly chaotic in the way it communicates with each other. So
Right.
To me, it's just very missional.
Yeah, so we've covered a lot of things, and I think we're coming up on our hour mark, and I don't want to keep you too long. So let's really kind of hone into IEW. I know that you gave us a few links here. I'm going to put one up on the page, which is the 3 free lessons. So if you are interested in IEW, you're interested in trying it out, you want to see if it's a good fit for your family, they can give you 3 free lessons when you head to that link right there. But let's I'm going to ask Andrew to kind of give you a review of what you can get when you head here. And I'm going to grab our Fix It Grammar book so we can give people a real life example really quick.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we have this grammar program called Fix It, and it is kind of applied grammar. Each book has a story, and the story is divided into 1 or sometimes 2 sentence chunks. And there's 4 days worth for each week for a school year. So the story is divided up that way. It's mostly an editing practice, but we give instruction on what to look for in terms of capitals, end marks, comma rules, homonyms with spelling, looking for the parts of speech. And then it also connects with our structure and style and writing program, where we have these stylistic techniques called dress ups and sentence openers. So it's a very gentle way. There's nothing to really study to take a test. You can't fail. It's just a kind of like a game. You try to mark it, then you fix it, you fix it, and then you check the fix-up version against what you did. And if you found everything great, and if you didn't, well, you can do it again tomorrow. So most kids who have not liked whatever grammar they've been doing find that the fix-it is less painful, if not actually a little more enjoyable. So that's one thing we do. We also have our courses, Structure and Style for Students, on video. These are much more extensive in terms of composition. We work with source text, as I mentioned, and we move through 9 units, at least in the upper levels, with the level A, which is grade 3 to 5 reading level. We move through the first 7 of those units, and we provide the source text. It's a video with me teaching kids. I tell a joke every lesson. They like that. It's kind of general knowledge. Later on, they get to do their own research and write about the things that they are interested in. There's also creative writing and imaginative assignments in. But our system of 9 units, you can take a look at that on our website. And then addition to that, we have some things for literature. I believe, Brooke, the thing that you put in your package for people to get is it's a big, huge, monstrous reading list called Teaching the Class, or Timeline of Classics. And so you can see books that are organized, either written in or written about a particular time period, moving from ancient into modern. And then they are organized into elementary, middle, or high school reading level, either for you to choose books to read to your children or to get for them. Gail, who wrote the book, found that she was increasingly coaching younger moms on what books to choose, because let's face it, libraries are not safe places today.
Right.
You can't just take an 11-year-old child to a library and say, hey, go find a book to read.
Yeah.
That would be a very, very dangerous thing to do. The best way to use a library is to know what you want before you go there. And so this book, Timeline of Classics, that's part of your free, your what is it? What do you call it?
We're actually going to do a lucky draw offer. So we're going to give away the Timeline of Classics that Andrew was just talking about. I'm going to do a lucky draw really quickly, and it's going to draw from the audience. And if this is your name, that means that you win the digital copy, and I'll work with someone on Andrew's team to get that over to you.
Okay. And then in your package, you've got the free lesson thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then we also have an early reading and writing program called the Primary Arts of Language, PAL. It's very, I would say, multisensory and manipulative based. So if you're just starting with a 6, 7, 8-year-old in the world of reading and writing, that's an option as well. And then if you've got older kids, we've got college prep stuff. So lots and lots of options. And we have 100% unconditional, no time limit satisfaction guarantee on everything we sell. So people are welcome to buy something, and if it doesn't fit, just send it back. We'll give you all your money back, because the last thing we want is for anyone to ever bought something from us that isn't working well. But we have won awards from every magazine that gives awards for decades, and testimonials coming out the ears. So we're pretty confident that we can find a set of arts of language products to meet the needs of pretty much all homeschool families, co-ops, tutors, all of that.
Yeah. Miranda, I think you actually won. So you've been on with us for a couple of webinars, because I think you actually won another product. So we have you in there, and if you could email me, and I'll put that email in here, hello@homeschoolresourceco.com. And I'll work with someone from Andrew's team to get that over to you. And someone asked about the collection. So I put that offer back on the screen. Let me give this baby her pacifier. And I wanted to show you, this is the Fix It Grammar book. This is from our personal homeschool. I purchased this. This is not something that I received from Andrew. This is from our personal thing. This is the teacher book. And then this is my daughter's workbook, where she worked through it all. And I'll give you a little bit of an example. Let's see. we completed this book. So it's kind of hard to see on here, but it gives you a sentence that you just analyze and go through.
And then they copy over the fix-up version in a separate notebook. That's
right.
The idea. Although the new fix-its actually have the copy it down at the bottom of the page. So
they do. Okay.
Yep. Either way works.
So we actually have another full notebook that we it's almost like a report. We completely write the whole thing. Every day she adds a new one in there so she can go back and read through it and do what she can with that. So this is from our own homeschool. Like I said, Andrew didn't send that to me. We really use Fix-It. We love Fix-It. And we're actually moving to IEW fully because this was our first time using anything from IEW. So this coming school year, we completely use that. We will completely be using that curriculum. Another thing that Andrew gave me to put on here was, let's see if I can find it. There's this video that he did about cultivating language arcs from pre-K to high school. So we have that in there for you to go and watch and see. That's a free workshop that Andrew did on YouTube. It says, is there a math that Andrew recommends? And Amy, I think he talked about Math UC earlier from Demi Learning, which is another product that we've also used. And at any time, let's see, make sure we didn't miss over anything. And I know we have a lot of questions and things that we didn't get to. Like I said, Andrew very graciously gave us his time today for free, just because he loves supporting the homeschool community, I'm sure. And I was glad to be able to have him on today. If you have any questions for Andrew or for me or anyone, you can always send us an email. He just put their chat option up there. Email their team. I'm sure there's somebody there that'll be happy to recommend a resource or to help you out or take advantage of that money back guarantee. That is something that I didn't particularly know that they used or had, but I didn't send my product back either because I loved it. So Andrew, before we kind of wrap up, was there anything else that you wanted to add in there?
I would just say, Brooke, to all of the new homeschoolers, a lot of people came into homeschooling, because of COVID or because of circumstances that caused them to not want to send their children to a 5-day-a-week brick and mortar school anymore. And now, making the decision, do you want to stick with it? Do you want to continue this homeschooling? And I guess from my, decades of experience, having all grown-up children and looking back on the whole thing, the most important thing I would say is don't be stressed about academics. Academics is probably the least important thing about growing up. Relationship, experience, broad literacy, a zeal, a love of learning about stuff. These are all things that schools cannot do and do not do well, even when they try. And those are the things that happen in the home. The most important things about growing up are the things that are kind of in between the academics. It's the stuff of life. It's the lessons that you get. And by choosing to homeschool, you've expanded the amount of time you have to enrich your children in the most meaningful ways. And it all comes out in the wash. Parents say to me, oh, I just pulled my kids out of school and I have a 7th grader and a 5th grader and a 2nd grader and I want to cover all the bases. My basic advice is do not worry about covering all the bases. No school anywhere covers all the bases. It's not a reasonable or even a healthy goal. Instead, try to disconnect yourself from grade level thinking and do things together with your children and focus on those experiences. And in retrospect, your kids will look back and say, yep, that was the most important thing, when I was a young kid. And it won't probably be which math book you used or which spelling curriculum. It'll be more all the intangibles of life. So that would be my point of encouragement from my high and lofty position of being a grandfather.
I will tell you that every person that we have had on, this is probably our 10th or so live webinar that we've done, and every single person we have on reiterates that. And I know that you haven't watched our webinars before, because when we spoke in preparing, you said that you had never even heard of our company before we reached out and asked for you to come on. So but we had Hal and Melanie Young from Raising Real Men.
Oh yeah, good friends.
Yes, they are some great people, some great friends of ours. And that's one thing that they always reiterate is relationship. Once homeschool is over with, homeschool only lasts for so much time. So don't let that homeschool ruin the relationship with your kids, because when homeschool is done, if you didn't cultivate that relationship, what are you going to have left with your kids? How are you going to connect with them at that point? And how are you going to be able to raise healthy adults, or still be a part of your healthy adult children's lives when that is over with? And so I think if you take away anything from these webinars, realize that, because everybody who comes on here says that same thing. Cultivate those relationships with your kids. Don't worry about doing it all. Don't stress over the small things. Don't try to fit it all in. You are the parent in your home. God's given you those kids for a reason. All of those things are things that have been reiterated every webinar that we do. And like I said, Andrew has never watched one of our webinars. He's never participated with us before. And for him to say something like that, that's always reiterated, should just kind of bring it home for you guys. And I hope that everything that he said and everything that we've done today and throughout this webinar has been a blessing to you. I know that we've received emails. There's people in the chat that continually say, thank you so much for having done this. I want to thank y'all for sticking with me through this fussy baby that I've got. I want to thank Andrew for so graciously giving his time with us today, going over this curriculum, helping homeschool families. I want to remind everyone about the homeschool collection, which only goes through until Thursday. IEW has some freebies in that vendor hall as well that we have for you. That's only given to customers of the collection. If you are not in our Facebook group, search Homeschool Resource Co Community. I am going to be doing a live review of that of the collection in an hour or so. I'll be joining you in there. So go join us so you can get your inside look, and then come back tomorrow. We actually have Nathan from Bible Quest that's going to be joining us tomorrow. And Nathan works closely with Andrew because he works for IEW as well. So we'll have Nathan on with us tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, we'll have our science chat with Cindy from Our Journey Westward. And we'll kind of wrap up everything then as we go into the close of a homeschool collection. So thank you again, Andrew. And I sure do appreciate you coming on with us.
It's been a pleasure, Brooke. God bless you and all your work.
You too. Thank you.